Influence, Robert Cialdini Book Summary. Welcome to this Influence Cialdini Book Summary, where we break down one of the most important books in behavioral psychology and ethical persuasion. This isn't just a book about sales or marketing. It's about how humans think, decide, and get convinced, often without realizing it. If you've ever said yes and then wondered why, this summary is for you. Like the video and subscribe if you want to master the principles of persuasion and protect yourself from being manipulated by them. Robert Cialdini, a psychology professor, spent decades studying real-world influence. He infiltrated sales forces, fundraising campaigns, marketing teams, not as an expert, but as a silent observer. What he discovered became the foundation for 6 principles of persuasion that shape nearly every human interaction. These principles are universal. They're used by marketers, politicians, cult leaders, and even your friends and family. Often without malicious intent, but with powerful results. Let's dive into the first principle: reciprocity. Humans have a deep social contract. When someone gives us something, we feel compelled to give back. It's not taught, it's wired in, and it works across every culture and society. Cialdini gives the example of a study where waiters increased their tips dramatically just by offering diners a mint with the check. 1 mint led to a small increase, 2 mints, even higher. But the biggest boost came when the waiter added a personal touch, offering the mint, walking away, then returning to say, "You know what? You're a great guest, here's another mint." This wasn't about sugar, it was about perceived generosity. The response was subconscious reciprocity. The lesson: small, sincere gestures can trigger major responses. Not because people are weak, but because they're wired to restore balance. That's why free samples work. Why unsolicited gifts convert. Why charities send small tokens in the mail before asking for donations. It's not manipulation, it's psychology. The key to ethical persuasion here is to give first, give genuinely, and never give solely to take. Reciprocity loses power when it feels strategic. When people feel that you gave because you care, not because you're trying to control them, their loyalty is real. Cialdini warns that unethical influencers often abuse this principle. They give gifts they don't mean, praise they don't believe, or favors that come with invisible strings. And most people won't detect the trap until they're already emotionally indebted. That's why understanding this principle doesn't just make you more persuasive, it makes you more resistant to coercion. You'll recognize when a gift is actually bait, and that awareness puts you back in control. Next comes the second principle: commitment and consistency. Cialdini explains that once people make a small commitment, even a symbolic one, they feel psychological pressure to stay consistent with that image. In one famous study, researchers asked people in a neighborhood to place a small sticker in their window supporting safe driving. A week later, those same people were far more likely to agree to placing a huge, unattractive billboard in their yard for the same cause. Why? Because they'd already said yes in a small, low-risk way. That first commitment wasn't just about driving, it became part of their identity. Cialdini calls this the foot-in-a-door effect. Start small, secure a yes, then build. It's used everywhere. Marketers ask you to subscribe for free, then upsell. Recruiters ask for a referral, then ask for your resume. Social movements ask for a post, then ask for a donation. But it works best when the commitment is voluntary, public, and written. Those factors make it feel personal and harder to back out. One of Cialdini's examples involves a restaurant owner who reduced no-shows simply by changing how staff took reservations. Instead of saying, "Please call if you need to cancel," they asked, "Will you call if you need to cancel?" And waited for the customer to say yes. One word, yes, triggered internal pressure to follow through. Because we don't just want to seem consistent to others, we want to feel consistent to ourselves. This principle, like reciprocity, is neutral by nature. It can be used for good, helping people stay committed to goals, habits, and values. Or it can be exploited, trapping people in paths they didn't fully understand. That's why this Influence Cialdini book summary isn't just about applying psychology, it's about applying it ethically. Ask yourself, am I helping people act in alignment with their goals or am I manipulating them to serve mine? That question changes everything. Optimized Insights Part 1: This Influence. Cialdini book summary reveals the power of small actions when they trigger reciprocity and consistency. We are wired to return favors, even when we didn't ask for them. Once we commit, we want to appear consistent to others and ourselves. Ethical persuasion begins with honest intent, not tactics. If you're finding these principles of persuasion insightful, like the video and subscribe. Next, we'll explore how social proof and authority shape our behavior, often without us noticing. Continuing this influenced Cialdini book summary, we now move to two of the most powerful and commonly exploited principles of persuasion: social proof and authority. These principles often operate silently, guiding behavior not through logic, but through emotional shortcuts. Let's begin with social proof. This principle says, when uncertain, we look to others to decide how to act. It's why we check restaurant reviews before booking, why we hesitate to eat at an empty venue. A product with 10,000 five-star reviews instantly feels more trustworthy. Cialdini illustrates this with a chilling example. In emergency situations, people often freeze, not because they're indifferent, but because they're scanning others for cues. Guess, no one reacts. They suppress their own instincts. This is called pluralistic ignorance, and it's deadly. But it also reveals how powerful group behavior is in shaping individual decisions. In marketing, this translates into phrases like bestseller, most popular, choice, thousands, already joined. These are social proof cues, and they work because we equate popularity with correctness, especially when uncertain. One of Cialdini's famous experiments involved hotel towel reuse programs. When the sign in the room simply said, "Help save the environment, reuse," RATES were decent. But when the sign said, 75% of guests in this room reused their towels, rates skyrocketed. The change? Social proof, but hyper-targeted? It wasn't just what others did. It was what people like me in my situation did. This principle is amplified by similarity, proximity, and uncertainty. When we feel unsure and see people like us taking an action, we're more likely to follow. This is why video testimonials, customer stories, and user-generated content are so persuasive. They don't just say this works. They show someone like you saying it works. Cialdini warns that social proof can lead to dark places. From cults to mob behavior, groupthink to viral hoaxes, we often follow crowds off cliffs, emotionally speaking. When used ethically, social proof can guide positive behavior. It can help people feel less alone. It can normalize helpful choices. The key is authenticity. Fake reviews, inflated stats, or manufactured hype destroy trust. But honest social signals build it. Now, let's talk about authority. Humans are conditioned to obey perceived authority from childhood through adulthood. That's not necessarily bad, but it's dangerous when unexamined. Cialdini references the famous Milgram experiment. Participants were instructed by a scientist to administer electric shocks to another person. Despite visible distress, most participants obeyed, simply because the authority figure told them to. The experiment revealed a painful truth. People will override their own conscience when directed by perceived authority.
Oh, yeah.
In modern life, this shows up in more subtle ways. We trust doctors more in lab coats, even actors dressed. As doctors, we follow financial advice from people in suits, regardless of credentials. We assume people with titles know more than those without. Cialdini explains that authority is communicated not just through role, but through symbols, clothing, tone, posture, credentials, and even environment. That's why scammers wear badges, why influencers name-drop credentials. Corporate design often mimics academia or law. Authority is a powerful shortcut, and again, it can be used for good or for deception. Ethical influence uses authority to clarify truth, not to dominate others. For example, a doctor who explains treatment options with humility builds more trust than one who commands obedience. Cialdini suggests using legitimate authority transparently, explain your background, offer expertise, but always invite critical thinking. He also emphasizes the importance of recognizing false authority cues in others, especially in advertising, politics, and high-stakes decisions. Look for signals of substance, real credentials, real data, real accountability, because the moment we surrender judgment to a symbol of power, we stop thinking critically. And that's where influence turns into manipulation. The deeper takeaway is this: social proof answers. What do others like me do? Authority answers. Who should I trust and why? But in both cases, the power lies in emotional efficiency. These principles save cognitive effort, and that makes them susceptible to misuse. So the ethical persuader must not only understand them, but wield them with responsibility. Optimized Insights Part to this Influence Cialdini book summary reveals how we follow crowds and obey experts even when we shouldn't. Social proof works best when it's relevant, it's relatable, and authentic. Authority isn't about titles, it's about earned trust, communicated transparently. Ethical persuasion invites thought, not blind obedience. If this section of the Influence Cialdini book summary opened your eyes, like the video and subscribe. In the next part, we'll explore the final principles, liking and scarcity, and how they shape desire more than logic ever could. In this Influence Cialdini book summary, we've already explored 4 key principles of persuasion: reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, and authority. Now, we turn to 2 principles that tap directly into emotion: liking and scarcity. Let's start with liking. We're far more likely to say yes to people we like. That might seem obvious, but Cialdini dives deep into why we like certain people and how this preference is shaped. The liking principle is influenced by 5 main factors. 1. Physical attractiveness. It creates a halo effect. Attractive people are often incorrectly assumed to be smarter, kinder, and more competent. 2. Similarity. We trust people who seem like us. Shared interests, backgrounds, values, all build rapport. 3. Compliments. We're drawn to those who flatter us, even when we know it's strategic. 4. Contact and cooperation. Familiarity breeds comfort. The more we work or spend time with someone, the more we tend to like them. 5. Association. We unconsciously transfer emotions from one thing to another. If someone delivers good news, we link them to that positivity. These factors aren't new, but their power is underestimated. One of Cialdini's studies involved car salesmen trained to look for any point of personal connection: same hometown, favorite sports team, mutual interest. When they brought it up during conversation, sales skyrocketed, not because the car changed, but because the relationship did. Similarly, political campaigns often try to humanize candidates with stories, pets, or family details because likability wins trust. But here's the ethical catch. Liking can be manufactured. We like people who flatter us, who mimic us, who dress like us. But that doesn't always mean they deserve our trust. Cialdini encourages us to ask, do I trust this person's message or just their charm? And for persuaders, the advice is simple: build genuine connection. Don't fake similarity or force compliments. Instead, be curious, be warm, find authentic overlap. Likability shouldn't be a tactic. It should be a reflection of real emotional presence. Now we move to the final principle, scarcity. All 6 principles, this one triggers the fastest emotional reaction because it ties directly to loss aversion. We're not just motivated by what we want, we're driven by what we fear losing. Scarcity creates urgency. When we think something is rare, exclusive, or disappearing, our brain shifts from logic to instinct. We want it more, simply because we might not get it. Cialdini points to classic phrases: only 3 left in stock, offer ends tonight, this item is not available in stores, by invitation. Only these signals trigger our fear of missing out, FOMO, and override rational analysis. One experiment showed that people rated cookies from a nearly empty jar as more desirable than identical cookies from a full jar. Nothing changed except perceived scarcity. Scarcity doesn't just affect products, it shapes behavior. Exclusive events feel more valuable. Limited opportunities spark faster decisions. Restricted information feels more credible. Cialdini warns that scarcity increases perceived value, but only when it feels genuine. Artificial scarcity, like fake countdowns or false inventory, eventually destroys trust. Used ethically, scarcity highlights real urgency or limitation. It helps people act decisively. But when used manipulatively, it damages credibility and burns relationships. The deeper psychology behind scarcity is this: we equate rarity with worth. That's why we chase limited editions, vintage items, VIP access. Scarcity makes something feel more significant not because of its utility, but because of its status signal. This is why luxury brands limit availability, why invite-only platforms feel exclusive, why marketers use phrases like last, chance, doors closing, or next opportunity in 6 months. The scarcity principle is emotionally charged. It taps into immediacy, desire, and anxiety, and it works best when paired with other principles, like social proof or authority. For example, only 20 spots left and over 1,000 people already registered. Seats are limited, and this expert only teaches twice a year. This creates layered persuasion where scarcity amplifies commitment and social proof. But Cialdini's greatest warning here is clear: persuasion without ethics becomes coercion. The moment your audience feels tricked, pressured, or misled, you lose not just the sale, but the relationship. So how do you apply scarcity ethically? 1. Tell the truth. If something is limited, explain why. Use scarcity to support urgency, not create panic. 3. Pair scarcity with value. Make sure the offer is worth it. 4. Don't fake it. Your audience is smarter than you think. Used correctly, scarcity helps people make decisions they've been delaying. Used poorly, it drives them away permanently. Optimized Insights Part 3: This Influence. Cialdini book summary reveals how liking and scarcity shape emotional urgency. We're more persuaded by people we like, but liking should never replace critical thinking. Scarcity triggers faster decisions, but only works when it's real. The ethical persuader builds connection and clarity, not panic or pressure. If this section of the Influence Cialdini book summary helped you see persuasion more clearly, like the video and subscribe. In the next part, we'll explore how these 6 principles are used in real life, from marketing to relationships, and how to defend yourself from unethical influence. Now that we've explored all 6 principles of persuasion: reciprocity, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity, this Influence Cialdini book summary shifts toward real-world application. How do these principles show up in everyday life? Cialdini offers example after example that illustrates just how frequently we're influenced, not by facts or logic, but by emotional triggers embedded in everyday decisions. Let's begin with sales and marketing. Retailers don't just display prices, they use influence cues strategically. When a product is labeled bestseller, you're seeing social proof. When it says only 3 left at this price, that's scarcity. A testimonial from a celebrity or doctor adds authority. A friendly message from a brand representative invokes liking. Each principle stacks, increasing the chance of a purchase without increasing pressure. Online platforms are even more sophisticated. Think of Amazon, Airbnb, or Booking.com. 1 room left at this price. Booked 14 times in the last 24 hours. This host is a superhost. Travelers love this property. These aren't just facts. They're behavioral nudges designed to shift perception and accelerate action. But influence isn't limited to business. It affects personal relationships, negotiations, and leadership. A manager who opens meetings by asking, "What could I have done better last week?" uses vulnerability and reciprocity. A partner who gives a thoughtful gift before asking for support activates commitment and liking. A coach who tells stories of past victories creates a shared identity and social proof. Cialdini shows that influence is everywhere, and that's why awareness matters. He warns that unethical persuaders weaponize these principles. They don't just want to sell you something, they want to condition your response so you stop questioning entirely. That's where this book becomes not just a guide to persuasion, but a manual for defense. Here's how to protect yourself. 1. Recognize the trigger. When you feel urgency, pressure, or emotional shifts, pause. Ask, what's influencing me right now? 2. Name the principle. Is it scarcity, authority, social proof? By labeling it, you regain control. 3. Separate the message from the method. Is the product or idea actually valuable or just packaged persuasively? 4. Delay your decision. Give yourself space to evaluate. Influence works best when we act fast. 5. Trust your discomfort. If something feels off, it probably is. Cialdini shares one story where a woman was pressured to donate to a questionable cause. She felt uneasy but didn't want to appear rude. Only later did she realize she was reacting to reciprocity. The fundraiser had given her a small gift. Once she understood that, she made better decisions in future encounters. That's the power of awareness. It turns automatic responses into conscious choices. One of the book's most important lessons is that influence isn't inherently bad. In fact, it's neutral. It's how it's used, and the intent behind it that determines its impact. Used ethically, these principles help people overcome fear, make decisions faster, and take positive action. They help leaders build trust, brands build loyalty, and individuals build connection. Used unethically, they trap people in commitments. They didn't mean purchases they didn't need, or beliefs they didn't question. That's why Cialdini ends this part of the book by calling for responsible influence. He urges professionals, marketers, leaders, parents, educators to see persuasion not as a game, but as a form of leadership. Because every time you use these principles, you're shaping someone's behavior. That's power. And power demands care. He also encourages individuals to become more defensively aware. To understand that being influenced doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. But understanding how influence works, that makes you stronger. Optimized insights. Part for this Influence Cialdini book summary shows that persuasion surrounds us in every interaction and conversation. Awareness is your best defense. Recognize the trigger before you react. Influence isn't manipulation unless it overrides autonomy. Use persuasion as a tool for clarity, not control. If this part of the Influence Cialdini book summary gave you tools to protect yourself and persuade with integrity, like the video and subscribe. In the next part, we'll dive into Cialdini's surprising journey and what makes this book so uniquely credible as we continue this Influence Cialdini book summary. We shift from the 6 principles to something just as important, the story behind them. What makes Influence such a credible, enduring book is not just its content, but how Cialdini discovered it. Most psychology books are written from an academic distance, but Cialdini didn't just research influence, he experienced it. He didn't sit in a lab testing theories. He embedded himself in real-life situations where influence happens. He joined sales teams pretending to be a trainee. He worked with marketers, recruiters, and fundraisers. He attended training programs that teach compliance techniques. And through this undercover psychologist approach, he observed influence from the inside, watching how people respond under real emotional pressure. That methodology makes the book different from most behavioral texts. It's not just about what people do in theory, it's about how they behave when it matters. For example, Cialdini talks about his time inside a car dealership. He watched how sales reps slowly layered reciprocity, liking, commitment, and scarcity into the customer experience. Each step felt natural, but it was orchestrated. He describes how one tactic involved giving the customer a special discount, only to later find a mistake in the offer. The rep would return with a revised price, but the buyer, already feeling committed, would still go forward. It's a classic consistency trap. Once people say yes, even to a flawed offer, they want to stay aligned with that decision. Shocked Cialdini wasn't how often these principles were used, but how predictably they worked. In another example, he recounts helping a charity increase donations simply by changing the script of their volunteers, by asking, "Would you be willing to donate?" Instead of just asking for money, the response rate went up significantly. Why? Because the question prompted an internal commitment before the request was made. Now, these aren't just clever tricks. They're emotional algorithms built into human behavior. And Cialdini's strength is in showing that they're everywhere, not just in business, but in relationships, parenting, politics, education. He also points out that while most people use these principles unconsciously, professionals learn to use them systematically. That's where the ethical tension lies. If you know that certain words, cues, or sequences will increase compliance, what do you do with that knowledge? Cialdini answers by doubling down on ethics. He says influence, when used responsibly, can solve problems, help people take action they've delayed, encourage positive habits, build trust through transparency, simplify complex decisions. But he's equally blunt about the danger. When influence is used to manipulate or deceive, the cost is long-term trust and, eventually, business failure. Even if you win once, manipulation leaves a mark. People remember how they felt, even if they can't explain why. That's why Cialdini insists that the most powerful persuaders are not the flashiest or loudest, but the ones who respect the decision maker. They present clear value, use principles to reduce friction, not override choice. They focus on building relationships, not extracting responses. And this is what makes influence different. It's not just a how-to on persuasion, it's a lens for understanding human behavior. It teaches you how to see the patterns in ads, in conversations, in meetings, and decode what's really happening. More importantly, it teaches you how to communicate with integrity in a world full of noise. Optimized Insights Part 5. This Influence Cialdini book summary reveals how real-world observation created real-world insights. Influence isn't theoretical, it's emotional, and it happens in everyday moments. Cialdini's method, immersion over distance, made his findings more human and more practical. The best persuaders use influence to clarify, not coerce. If you're finding this Influence Cialdini book summary helpful, like the video and subscribe. In the final part, we'll recap all 6 principles and show how to apply them ethically in your own life. Let's close this Influence Cialdini book summary with a powerful recap and a look at how to use these principles ethically and effectively in your own life. You've now learned the 6 timeless principles of persuasion. 1. Reciprocity. People feel obligated to return favors. 2. Commitment and consistency. Once people commit, they align future behavior to that choice. 3. Social proof. We follow what others, especially people like us, are doing. For authority, we trust experts, symbols, and credentials. 5. Liking. We're more likely to say yes to people we know and like. 6. Scarcity. We desire what seems rare, limited, or exclusive. Each principle is rooted in psychology. Each one speaks to how humans make decisions fast, emotionally, and with limited awareness. But the real power isn't in knowing the principles. It's in knowing how and when to use them, and doing so with integrity. Let's look at some real applications. In business sales, use social proof, thousands of customers. Love this and scarcity offer ends tonight to increase conversions, but only when true. Marketing, lead with value, reciprocity, show expertise, authority, and connect emotionally, liking, customer loyalty. Reinforce commitment with small yes moments, then build from there. In leadership, set a clear purpose, then use authority and consistency to rally teams. Give feedback that builds trust through liking and vulnerability. Recognize and reward behavior that reflects values, reinforcing commitment. In everyday life, when asking for help, start by offering value. First, reciprocity. When introducing change, begin with small, easy commitments. In seeking influence, build genuine relationships. Don't rush to tactics. But Cialdini's greatest contribution isn't just helping. You persuade others, it's helping you see persuasion more clearly. He encourages you to ask, which principle is at play here? In every ad, pitch, or negotiation, pause before reacting, especially to urgency, flattery, or limited time offers. Reclaim your power by becoming aware of emotional triggers. In other words, be influenced on purpose, not by accident. That mindset is your greatest defense and your greatest asset if you choose to become a persuader with purpose. Because in the end, persuasion is not about control, it's about clarity. It's not about manipulating others, it's about helping them make better choices, faster and more confidently. Used well, the principles of influence don't just sell products, they build trust, solve problems, and strengthen relationships. Used poorly, they erode confidence, create regret, and damage reputations. So whether you're a leader, marketer, coach, or simply someone who wants to communicate more effectively, this book is your blueprint. Because influence isn't going away, but with awareness, intention, and empathy, you can master it. Optimized Insights final section, this Influence Cialdini book summary ties together the 6 principles into one cohesive strategy. Clarity over coercion. Influence works best when it respects autonomy, not overrides it. Persuasion builds trust, repeat behavior, and long-term results. In a world full of noise, understanding influence gives you focus. If this Influence Cialdini book summary helped you become a better communicator, like the video and subscribe. Every week we break down the psychology behind human decisions so you can lead, connect, and influence with asterisk purpose.